use case that we can think of doing in an activity is there are some standard keywords or standard methods that there in activities that we can use in day-to-day application development and activities. So we're going to learn those standard keywords. Apart from that, then what we can expect, we can see what is a primary page, what is a step page, what is a parameter page in an activity, and probably even take a look at how we can customize some of the things in activities, so which makes things a bit more rather interesting in activities. Okay. All right. So let's let me just show you something here. Just look at the content. Right. Yeah. So this one here. Yeah. Right. So if you take any activity rule, okay, any activity rule that you can name any of it, then the activity has some context in which it runs, within which it runs. Okay. So when I say the context in which it runs is that probably think of it like a container, or on what context that the particular action that we define in an activity to be running on. Say let's open an activity just to be clear on that. I don't think my system is up yet. Okay, we're just starting up. Yeah, so let's run here. So, but either way, before we go there or not, what we need to know is importantly about, primarily is about these activity row. Okay, so the activity is, as you already might know by now, it's a very powerful type of rule which can do almost all things that we want in a traditional programming language. So you can write your own Java code there. Okay, so I can say that custom Java code. Right. Then you can parse data, right? Then you can set data. Then you can loop on data. Then you can integrate with external systems. So this is just some of the things that you can do with an activity rule. Okay, so how can you do all this in an activity rule? Because till now we have learned about different types of rules, and they mostly have just one purpose, right, or one function. But how is an activity able to do all this? That is because an activity is a composition of different methods. Okay, so it consists of different methods. So like this, of different methods that can do this. Okay, so when I say custom Java code, then the method name is Java. Then you can have, I think the method name is more Java also. Never mind. Then for parse data, the method name would be, say, parse XML. Set data, obviously the method name is property set. Simple, right? Loop on data, so you have loop. Integrate with external systems, the method name is would be something like connect -soap or whatever, one of the examples. But in effect, what really happened is we are able to ensure that our application, our end-to-end application, ideally requires all these functionalities, like different activity rules, all the work that we need, and all these different methods will aid us in developing a very effective Pega application. Okay, so you should know in hand what are the activity rules and what is an activity rule capable of doing. Okay. Yeah, so you have, I think, yeah, so then again, I think there is a question the question is on database integration specific methods of rules in Pega. Yeah, so similarly, when you integrate with external systems, if yeah, so we can ask something like talk to DB queries. So for running DB queries, you can do method names like obj-browse, then you have obj-open, then you can do something like rdb-list, anything like this. Okay, so there are quite a number of methods to integrate with external entities, so or with the database, with either Pega database or an external database. Okay, so we will learn about some of the important methods, not all of them, but the things that are very commonly used. Let's open an activity first, and let's see. Let's open a Pega out of the box activity. Okay, so in order to see the APIs, you can just click on Designer Studio here, application, and then see process rules, process, and then APIs here. Say for example, there is an API for attaching a URL or attaching a note. So let's open that. Yeah. So if you see here, this is how the activity rule form looks like. What's important for us to know and understand is, say, you see, like every other rule, you have the class, you have the ID, and then the rules. Nothing fancy or different here. Now, this is the steps. This tab is where you have the actual logic. Okay, so you see here you have step 1, 2, 3, 4. You can have n number of steps here. And here you have a loop, okay, then you have a when condition, and then this is where you have the actual logic as to this, what exactly is going to be done in that particular step that is set on this method. Okay, then after that you have something really important which is called as a step page. what the step page does is it just holds what is it has the capability to change the current context in which it is run. Okay, so when I say a context, what I mean by that is, say for example, in Pega, almost all the work objects or any data that we have is held in an object called as a page. Okay, so all the data that we have is held in a Java object. It's actually Java object in the JVM, so just called as for now just understand that it's more like a key value pair. So you have a page which has like some property like as a key, and then it has a value. Okay, so the page is a key value pair which will be there on the clipboard. Now the question is, what is the step page on which you want this method to act on? Okay, so when you say exit activity, or say for example something more meaningful, when you say property set, you're saying that you're going to set the property on this particular page. Okay, if this is a blank, then the step page is like which means that you're not going to, currently this is an option to override the current context. So the current context will be always held in something called as a primary page. So I would say here, if you want that to be changed, then you set something here on the step page. So you see here again, the other one is going to the Java here, so on. Then you have something like obj opened by handle. What this does is this opens an object using a key. Okay, so and if you see here, you have a step page as a work object page. So we were thinking that all these steps were going to act on the primary page, but when we reach step 6, the developer here has decided that the object that is going to be opened using a key, or when I say handle or like a unique key, that is going to work, that's going to update this step page. Okay, so you see here, now what's important to understand is the step page definition. So let's step page, and then let's see what is a primary page and all that. So right, so if you see here, this is a standard definition that Pega gives for a primary page. Let's read it. It says a primary page is a clipboard page. So when I say a clipboard page, just know that it's a key value pair. So clipboard page is a key value pair, property and value. Okay. Now primary page is a key value as a clipboard page which has the same class as the applies to class with the activity and is designated when the activity is called. This page is called is the default locational property, which you're saying reference the dot and no preceding page name. For greater clarity, we can reference a property in the primary page using the keyword primary followed by a dot and the property name. Now what's important here to understand is like, let's try to get a little bit more context here. The context is, it says a primary page is a clipboard page which is the same applies to same class as that applies to class of the activity. So when I say it applies to class, it is the class of that particular activity. This one here, it says work dash. So whenever say, for example, I say I add a new step here, okay, and then I say something like property set. Okay, now mind you, I'm not doing anything on the step page. Now all that I will do is I will just expand this. This is how you add a method. So you set the method name. So in order to even set the method name, say for example, you can see all the list of methods here. It's auto populate. So you just type in property hyphen set. Now if you see here, what they're trying to convey here is, if I say go to the property name here and then I say dot, and if you see here, I can see all the properties under the work dash. How is the system able to know that whenever I reference a property, it should give me that? It's because the applies to class is what is taken as a context here. Okay, suppose I want to change that context. Okay, now either you can just keep this as like dot as nodes, okay, or I can reference it like the keyword using primary dot has nodes. Both are same. Okay, which is like when it is primary. In this case, both are same because there is no step page here, and the context is always towards this applies to class. So if I have the primary class as this one, then it, whenever I reference it, I'll get primary dot the particular property name. Now, the other option that the other context in which we are doing. So now this is what I mean by context. So context means that what are you going to work on? What is the object that you want to work on? That is the context. Okay. Now that is, this method is going to act on what? Now if I want to change this to something else, say for example, I will reference some page, some other page. Okay. So I will say page A. Okay. Now I need to define this pages of which class. That I will define in this pages and classes here. So let's come here, I will say A, and then I will say, for example, give something like work dash cover dash. Now if I come here, now if I just do a dot, I think I have to set it A, set it. Now if I say just do a dot, now do you see that now it's directly referencing work dash cover dash. Okay. So now the entire context has changed in the effect that the step page is what will be always referenced. So within this particular step, okay, the context is this particular step page. That is now step page A. So that is what the context means now. So this property set is going to act on this particular page. Okay, so which is, I will just reference here like dot, and then I can put it here. Or if I don't want that, I want to still reference this particular one. So all that I need to do is just say primary dot, and then you can immediately get work dash. Okay, now that is the important concept about knowing what is a primary page and what's a step page. So let's just even read a step page, what a step page is. Say for example, what they're trying to say is, when a branch or a call instruction executes as defined in the steps tab, the page in the step page column or the step becomes a primary page of the call activity. So what they're further saying is, say for example, I'm going to use another method called as a call, and then I'm going to call another activity. So this is how you would have, this is the syntax for calling another activity. So say for example, I say call an activity like action at cover. So now what happens is, the context in which this at covered is being called is with this step page. So if you see here, the step page here I defined was work dash cover dash, and immediately when I call action call and then space and I click on the down key arrow, I'm getting the work dash cover dash context. So what the concept here is, now when I call another activity with this step page, this activity runs on that particular step page. Or if you don't give the step page, then it will run on the same primary page, which is the same applies to class. If I see here, I should get the work dash here, same concept. Okay, so yeah, it says that is a primary page of an activity becomes a step page of each step, except for steps, whereas a step page column is not blank. Okay, so whenever you have a step page, that is a context on which your particular method is running. Okay, now there is one more type of page called as a parameter page, which holds the list of parameters. Yeah, this holds a list of parameters. Say, for example, and the values. Say here you have parameters, and this parameter is pretty straightforward, right? I think not much explanation needed. If you're expecting some temporary values, then you send it as a parameter. And if you want to ensure that whatever code that you've written is not obsolete only for just one time, then you can just parameterize it so that it can be used for everything. Okay, say this one, attach a node to a work object, which is a general code. It says attached to a work object. So here the parameter that you will set for that is work object ID. So if you give work object ID 1 and it attaches, then you give 2, then also it attaches. But now during the course of the execution of this particular code, you want to see what is the parameters. All that you will do is just say, even on this context, so here I can just see here and reading the parameter and then setting the value, and I think here as well they did it. Right, so that was like, generally people always get confused between these concepts, like what is a primary page. Okay, now let me just repeat. So when I say primary page, it is a page of that particular class. Okay, that applies to class of the activity, which is a context in which whatever you do by default in the methods is what it works on that. Then you have the next thing that you have is a step page, which can override that only in that particular method. And then you can have parameters page. What that does is the parameter will ensure that the code that you've written is not just only for that particular scenario. Like you can use it in multiple other scenarios where you just want to get the particular it'll be made more generic, okay, using the parameter step. Now if you come here, let's take a look at these parameters a little bit more. So if you see here, there are two types of things under this parameters tab. So one is the general parameters that we have, and the other thing is called as a local variable. Now the thing with parameter is, say for example I have written an activity and some other activity, and I want to call this particular activity from that activity. Then I can give these parameters and call it. Pretty obvious, right? Like you want to call a method from another method, you have to give the parameters. Now all these parameters are not mandatory unless you make it required. So if I just simply call this without passing any of the parameters, then it would do. Okay, so that's just one thing. Now there is something else called as a local variable. What the local variable is like is considered more like a scratch pad. Okay, so a scratch pad is you write some logic to set some property values. Then what happens is you want to hold an intermediary value between some steps. So that is from the start of this activity, the step 1, all until the last step. Here is till step 17. That is, if you want to hold some property value there or some temporary values there, like a scratch pad, like in a scratch pad, you can use a local variable for that. Okay, and local variable is available only in I think it's available only in activities. It's not available in any of the other flows or flow actions or anything, or any of the other rules for that matter. Okay, all right, so that is about the parameters. Now let's take yeah, right. Okay, so let's see here. There's a couple more things that we need to cover in an activity. So if you see here, there is a loop condition. What this loop does is, this is similar to what we saw in a data transform. So in the data transform, if you remember, we had like append and map to and append to and all those conditions which we learned in the last class. So similarly here you have a repeat condition, like which obviously go through a loop. You can have a simple for loop like in Java with a minimum value, max value and an increment, or you can have something like a for each page. So you have a page list, for which you can do for each embedded page, and whenever you give a loop here, you're expecting that the context in which that you're going to run on will be defined in the step page. So you have to give this loop condition with regard to the step page, like both are interdependent to each other. So if the step page consists of a page list, okay, page list property, then you can give this loop condition here, okay. And then you can write a method on that. Then even you can add a child, multiple child steps into that particular page, and onto the particular activity step, which will all loop through and then do a number of things. Again, the when condition is pretty straightforward here. It just checks the condition. It says either continue the when condition or skip it. You can jump to a later step, skip step, exit if you're in a loop. You can exit that particular iteration or exit that particular step activity, something like that. Now, further to this, there are some important keywords also that you have to know. These are the keywords that whenever you are in a loop, you need to know about these keywords, which stays true for activity and data transform, and even some other rules where if suppose you are in a loop, you can use these keywords. Current will identify the current index. Append will append to the last one. Last gives the last highest index. Prepend will insert an element in the top. So consider this more like you have a stack or something like that. So you want to either push or you want to pop. So whenever you want to push and pop, you need to know all these. It's good to know the current index, whether you want to append to the last one. If I say append to the last one, that will be like a queue. So you have items like this here, and then you append an item to the last. Or if you want to append it, push to the front, or you want to insert at some particular number, then you can do that as well. Okay, but if you're in a loop, you can use this param.py for each count as well, and that gives you the for each count. So you're in a loop, and what is a loop counter there? Now, okay, now if you want to know what are the different activities that are available in different methods available in an activity, then these you can find it in this help here. Just click on this link in PDN. This gives you the elaborate list of all the methods available in an activity. So let's see here. See here, this is categorized in alphabetical order. So see here A and all these, and then you have n number of methods are available actually. And so, yeah. Right, so apart from methods, then you have some keywords. what this does is, say for example you want to like again some keywords which are specific to activity rules. So I say, if you see here it says call, you have the option to call under activity. So the syntax for using that is, you'll have to say call and then space the activity name. Collect is, I think there is another type of rule called as a collection rule. Just ignore it for now. When I say Java, I'll just simply write Java and you can expand it. Say here, you click on this one and then you get a nice place to write some Java code. So if you want to queue another activity to be executed asynchronously, you can use these. But yeah, just know that these are some of the standard methods and steps that you will use. Okay, so these are like keywords, not exactly methods. These are keywords, and each of these keywords have some particular action. So I think let's do one thing here. Now we'll first unlink these because these are specific to my application. Right. Now, yep, so this kind of shows you different options that are available in an activity, and we've seen all the different methods and different options. Now let's I think there are some couple of questions. Let's take a look at it. Right, so database integration specific methods. I think are rules in Pega. So okay, right, so this. Right, so DB specific methods. So I say, yeah, so let's talk to talk to database. So you have all the methods that start with obj hyphen is are methods that can talk to the database, even the ones saying that rdb hyphen. These are primarily two methods, two groups of methods who have the ability to talk to database. So whenever I say obj, let's take a look at these. Let's take a look at some of them. I think you already have some here. See here, there's something called obj open by handle. So if I expand this one here, it says you want to open an object from the database using a particular key, then you can give here as what is the key here. Do you want to log that object? When you commit some value on that particular page, so do you want to release on commit? Do you want to release a lock on commit? So those are things that parameters that are available. So now a common interview question is, what is the difference between obj dash methods and rdb dash methods? So yeah, between obj methods and rdb. This gets asked almost tirelessly by many people, always, all the times. So people have a misconception saying that obj, and people give wrong answers to this always. They say that obj is for internal classes and rdb is used for external classes. That's not correct. Both using obj methods we can and rdb methods, both of these you can access external and internal database classes or database tables. So it doesn't matter what type of method that we use. We can access both external classes and external tables or internal tables. Both of these have the capability. Now, the primary difference between these is that obj methods can have a predefined queries. Now you have some predefined logic to get the data, which means that you cannot write your own custom query to say, for example, you want to have like 3 or 4 types of join on the particular query. You cannot write that using an obj method. So you cannot write custom queries using obj, but using RDB you can write your own custom query. Okay, you can include multiple joins, etc. Just know that you can write a custom query, so it can be more optimized at times as per our business requirement. Okay, but obj is like more a predefined set of methods that we can use. So it's not it says open by handle or browse or things like that, so it has its own limitation. So when I say obj, it says predefined queries. So they're just parameterized primarily. Okay, now that is for the obj method. Now another important difference, another important really good reason why you have to use an obj or an RDB is when you want an RDB method can be used to call a stored procedure. Whereas obj methods cannot be used to call a stored procedure. Now, because this obj already has a predefined queries, then it becomes a lot more easier to maintain in the long run. Whereas because you've written a custom query, obviously it becomes if the query is like really complicated, it becomes slightly difficult to maintain and use in the long run. Okay. Then so in obj we cannot so you can only have classes in or queries in I think predefined queries. This would actually primarily just know that if there are questions for you guys. So this is how you will have to answer it, difference between obj and RDB methods. Okay, so there is absolutely nothing else that you can do here. And I think obj can be used to read from the blob. I think even RDB can also do that, so that's not much of a difference. Okay, but primarily these are the 3 important differences that you can have between an obj method and the RDB methods. Okay, now let me look at the next question. Yeah, so you can have obj open by handle. Question is, can we come up with a common logic to find the handles? Yes, of course, why not? So if you have obj open by handle, you have to find the common handle. See the scenario here. They have created a param.ins handle here. So whenever you run this obj open by handle, you just have to set this parameter. That's all. Right? Now, how you set this parameter is all that you have to write in the previous steps. Or when someone else is calling this particular activity, you have to write the logic there. So you can come with a common logic to find the handles, because honestly, like, you don't have to go find the handle, because that should be your business requirement. Say you want to open an object, you should know which object you need to open. Okay, so I don't see there is, you have to write a logic to find the ID. It's like you want to open a work object. Why would you have a logic to find which work object to open? If you have a request, you open that particular request. That's all.
Okay, the PYID and the INS handles are different, right, Rahul?
Yeah. So yeah. So what happens here is, if let's see what is a PYID and what is an INS handle. Say for example, I run one work object. Let's run a scenario here. Okay. Now, if you carefully look at, so now this is another important thing that it's easy for you to use as well. If you open the method, if you expand the method here, it has a method parameters. Now you want you're not really clear what these parameters mean, so you can just click on this question mark. It's like a help, so it says, it gives all the information here. Okay. Now, importantly, now when you come into here, C-31, let's open this here. Open the clipboard. Now if I open the PI work page, click on this one. So now there are two things here. One is the PYID, okay, which is C-31 that we have here, this one here. So this one. And the other one is the PX INS PZ INS key. So now with the last, because of the word PZ. You see here the PZ INS key. This is the actual handle. Okay, so which is, when I say that this is the actual handle, I mean that it is the actual primary key which is there in the database for this particular entry here. So if you go to the DB, this is the primary key for this particular table, and this is the unique identifier for this object. So if you see here, generally the PZ INS key is a combination of the work pool name. So this is the work pool. Okay, and then followed by something here called as C-31. So this is the ID. This is followed by ID. Right, so what happens here is, now let's see what is a PZ. PYID is, consider PYID as the work object ID, and it's more like a incremental counter. So whenever you create a C hyphen, you have a prefix C-32, it just keeps counting, incrementing as and when new objects are created. Now PZ INS key is the actual unique key for this particular entry, and that will be a combination of your work pool plus keys. Okay. So generally, normally keys would be key only one key, and it would be PYID. That is, now let me show you where we have configured that. So for that, we just open the particular, let's go to the C claim, and if you go to the definition, by default it's always defined on the work pool. So not even on the C claim here. You see here, this is a work pool, right, for us, the class group which contains both of these. Now if I open this one in the definition, you can see here the key defined here. You see here keys, and then you have given it here. Now what you may not realize is you can add the keys not now, but if you have, say for example, you have created during the case creation or even before you create work objects, you have the flexibility to modify the key. So instead of just PYID, you can, if you want to make it more unique, you can put some like px create date time, or you can put px create operator, or you can create your own property and set the key there. Okay, so if you have done that, then
Keys at a later point of time, Rahul, after creating few work objects, so will there not be any integrity issues like the
no,
other
no,
person?
no. Yeah, so what I'm saying is you cannot change the key after you have created a single work object. So it's saying like whenever you have a database table, in the database table, if you want to change the primary key after you have some entries in that particular table, you cannot change that, because then, as you said, it affects the integrity of the data. So you have to delete all the data, or drop it, and then recreate that particular table, or just clear the data, then you can change the key. It's the same way as in a database table. If you want to change the primary key of the particular table, then you have to either delete all the data and change it, or I think you'll have to just live with that particular existing key. You cannot change the key after you have entries on that particular table. Is that clear?
Yeah, that's clear, Rahul. Another thing, on basic question, how the keys are linked to the tables, like through via index or directly linked, or how it is the access to that particular database through object obj open or RDB. So how does that link to the table?
Yeah, it links to the table by virtue of the uh, particular class. So say for example, here whenever I have a work pool, generally what happens is, this is, as I was saying, this is a work pool. Okay, this is a work
Yeah,
pool.
we have the table mapped to the class group, but the access path, that's where I'm having this confusion on how the access path is defined. I mean, the class group has the table defined, and the work pool is mapped to the class group. So
Yeah.
access is all taken care by Pega, or
Yeah.
is there something
So
that we should know?
mm, okay, yeah, there is something that you have to know. So there is something called as a environment variables that generally the Pega admin will take care. These are called as environment variables. What this would have is, so what these environment variable, what I mean by that is, there will be the database schema that we have to be aware of. So it will be the database schema. So so by default, you'll have two types of schemas in Pega. The one is called as Pega data, and the other is called as Pega rules. So what the Pega data will hold is all the data classes which hold the actual work object data. Pega rules is the tables which will actually have the rules that we create. So whenever we create a new rule in Pega, it would go and sit in this database tables, which is in a particular separate schema, whereas this one would go and sit in something called as Pega data. Okay. So from a developer perspective, you don't need to be aware of this, but as a senior architect or potentially someone senior in the team, you have to know these. So if you're, this is by default, as you said, this particular work pool, this is mapped to the table. So how is it mapped to table? It is mapped to table by virtue of the particular DB connection, the DB schema and all that. Now where is all this mapped? It is mapped in the brconfig.xml. So let's open that. Give me 1 second. Let me open that and show it to you. So if you see here, I've opened my local installation of the local installation folder. Consider this is a local installation folder that I have. Now inside this one, I can think. Oh, sorry, this is not the installation folder. This is the software on this one where you've installed Pega. So I think that would be in. Generally, that would be in the C drive. Yeah. So if you see here, you have the C drive and you have the exact location. So inside this, you have something called as Tomcat, and within Tomcat, you have a configuration file. So which is the place. If you open this context.xml here, this would have the actual. This is the actual place where you would have the resources and all these things defined here. So here you would have what is the name, what is the type of JDBC connection that you want to make. Generally, you will have to give the driver class name. If this is for a PostgreSQL, if it's for Oracle, you have I think, yeah, you have some driver name, different driver name for that, and MS SQL again a different driver name. Same way you would connect to it from a simple Java program. So you have the URL, you have the username, and you have the password.
Is this equivalent of the peer config file, Rahul, that we have in actual industry?
No, in the industry you will be always using this context.xml. Now, if this is only if you have in Tomcat, but if you have in see, the database connection is always defined only in this context.xml. Now you can change this instead of, this is particularly for Tomcat application server, but if you have a different application server like WebLogic or something, you have it defined in the WebLogic console. Okay, this is yes, let me open PR config as well so that it's a bit more clear for you. So that is, I think PR config is not available at the same place. It will be available under web apps. I think it's PR web. Yeah, here PR config.xml. So here, yeah. If you see here, yeah, you can see yeah, so if you carefully observe here as well, you have different DB details and all that. So you can even they've given even a simple syntax here. So when I was telling you about how we have like two different schemas, one for Pega rules and one for Pega data, it's called the split schema approach, but not that important for us. But if you see here, this particular configuration that I have, I don't have anything on this PR config.xml. Okay, I have just given the environment variables here. This is when I haven't given this automatically available. It says this is data source, so which is Pega rules, and this one is Pega data. So when we say it's a merged configuration, which means that everything is set here in one single schema, not a separate schema. But if you actually want the database information to be used, you can set it on the context.xml, or in say, for example, it depends again on different application servers. Some application servers take from PR config and the others take from context.xml. But primarily you have to keep in mind that this environment variable is the key concept for you. Have to, the link what you're asking for, that is actually available at this place. That is what you have to configure. It doesn't matter whether it's on context.xml or PR config.xml. That changes as per the application server. Is it clear? So you have to just, you have to know this URL. That's what is important. The same way, if you are programming something in Java, you want to create a database connection, you should know which URL, that you should know the URL to use. What is the driver? Either you can define it in one class or something else, but doesn't actually matter. Right. And if you see here, generally the prconfig.xml is inside prweb, web-inf and classes, but whereas the context.xml is directly inside this conf folder here, the configuration folder. Right. Now, I think there is another question. Is there a possibility that multiple page instances of the same applies to a class present in clipboard? Yeah, of course, there is a very good possibility that you can have multiple applies to multiple pages. The same applies to class, but they will all have the same. They can all have a different ID. When I say different ID, they can all have a different name. Say, you see here, I have a page here, d_app explorer pinned classes, which is of code Pega list. You can have one more, d_manage groups, also of code Pega list. But you can have only one page name. So the page name is unique here. Right? So the page name is what is unique.
But if the activity is called without creating any page name, that automatically goes into py work page, is it? If at all
No. If you call an activity, the primary page is a page of the current applies to class. That's it. It just sets the context. We don't say it is on which page.
Okay.
So it depends on the context in which you are running. Say, for example, now I'm on this work object. Now if I run an activity, say for example, like I have a button here, okay, or I put a action even saying that when the date of birth value changes, then run an activity. Now the context in which this runs is on the C-31, and this, all the information that you have here on this particular work object is always by default held in the PI work page. That is the reason by default whenever you run from the work object, it is on this PI work page. That is the only reason, because the context is always on the work object, and work object information by default resides on PI work page. That is why the context, that is why if you don't set anything, it's on PI work page. But say for example, you're going to create a button on a portal rule form. So you have a portal here. Now on this portal on the top here, I'm going to put a button here. Okay. Now if I run the activity, by default it may run on this particular section that it is embedded on. It may be on data dash portal or something. It is not necessarily going to run on PI work page. Okay. So it doesn't mean, whenever you run an activity, doesn't mean that it has to run on that particular work object or PI work page. It depends on where you're calling it from. Suppose you embedded it in a work object, then by default it will be on PI work page. If say for example, if it's not in context of work page, say on a portal or something, then it's on that particular data dash portal or something like that. I think there's another question about obj refresh and lock. So there is a method. Let's open this method. This is a pretty important method actually. Obj refresh and lock. So what happens here is there is if you open this one here, this is the definition, and suppose you the general steps for running, generally whenever you want to run a particular work object, or you are on a particular work object, or you are trying to open a particular work object, and then the work object is already open on the clipboard. Okay, so say the scenario is this, that Now, yeah, so you have this work object open here now. Okay, so by default, it doesn't mean that you have obtained a lock on the work object when you open the work object. It depends on the configuration that you have. You can either have like a timeout or something, wherein after some time you automatically lose a lock. But in order to be sure that you always have the lock whenever you're going to run some program, so that it doesn't work on stale data, you can execute this particular method before you do a property set, or you just do some data manipulation on that particular object by executing this method called as obj refresh and lock. What obj refresh and lock will do is it will refresh that particular object and then obtain the lock. So that happens. This is a fail-safe or a good programming practice, which would ensure that you always have the latest data with you. So that the data can become stale after some time. You currently, when you open the work object, by default the lock is given to you. But say, for example, after like 5 or 10 minutes, the lock, you may lose the lock. That the data may become stale. There could be an external entity which has come and updated our work object or things like that. So all that you can do using you can ensure that all that can be done in a smooth manner using a obj refresh and lock. Right. So obj refresh and lock is a fail-safe or a good programming practice to ensure that in an activity, and this is a method in an activity that can ensure you have the latest lock. So if the object is locked and the lock has not expired, basically you're not going to have any effect. Everything is still going to remain the same. But if the object is not locked, this method acquires a lock, and if necessary, it will replace the stale data with the current data. Okay.
Rahul, another question on the RDB thing. So, is there any way without using OBJ we can read the PZPV stream from database?
So PZPV stream is actually the binary large object. So if you can so generally, like, you want to read the blob, that is also done using that. Yeah, that's also a good difference between OBJ and RDB. So you can read the blob using RDB methods. I don't think you can read the blob using RDB also. I think I can probably cross check that and tell you. But I think you can see. You can use an RDB method also to read the blob.
I have worked in 5.2 when I had a situation to read something, but I have to use RDB. But at that time, just because we were not able to access blob from RDB, we had to optimize that particular column, and then we read it through RDB. So I'm not sure if it is the latest version that no, in RDB.
You optimize it and then you have to use it.
Yeah, that is in the older version 5.2, but I'm not sure if latest version has the possibility of having the read of the blob in RDB, so I'm not sure about that.
Okay, I think no, I think you're right. Even latest version that hasn't changed. So the OBJ, you can just read the blob in the OBJ encrypted. Right. Whereas in RDB you cannot read the blob. So apart from OBJ, I don't think there's any other way. Let's try to understand why. So what? There is a hack actually around this. So what the hack is that in OBJ you can have. So let me rephrase the question. Question is, can you read the encrypted blob, the binary large object of Pega, in any other way other than OBJ? So there is a out of the box stored procedure. If you go to the database in Pega, there is a stored procedure called as PR read from string. Suppose it's PR underscore read underscore from underscore string. So internally the blob directly calls the stored procedure. Okay, and that is how it also reads the blob. So if you are good SQL programmer, you can directly call that PR read from string and then get that information. Okay, but for maintainability and scalability perspective in the long run, or upgrade perspective in the long run, just use an OBJ only to read the blob. Don't go for this approach, because that can break, say for example in future, Pega can, the engineers in Pega can change this PR read from stream, and then that can hamper with your system working. So better go for OBJ methods itself to read the blob. Alright, any further queries here?
This is not particular to this thing, Rahul. Later point of time, if at all we have time, during that last debugging stuff and all, can we have a look at other configurations like PR config, what can impact what, and if you want the desired logging thing, so those things, if at all it's not already in list, if we have time, can we look at that?
Yeah, sure. Logging levels
And other admin stuff, like basics of admin stuff, not a deep dive into it, basics of how the web, the server all maintained, and the configuration changes impacts application behavior, so those things.
Yeah, I'm not written down, so we covered. Right, any further queries, anyone? Alright, so I think alright, yeah, I can cover James and rest as well. Integration, yeah, REST integration. Alright, I think that's all from my end then. So let's meet up tomorrow at the same time, and then go over the rest of the topics. Alright. Okay, people, so good day. Let's meet up tomorrow at the same time. Alright. Thank you. Thanks all for your time.
Thank you, Rahul. Thanks.